Now here's an image of John Stuart Mill. Notice that in the transition from the time of when Jeremy Bentham was a young man to the time at which Mill was, I guess, a middle-aged man, we've gone from painting to the daguerreotype as the primary means of representing notable folks. So here's an image of Mill. His dates were 1806 to 1873. He was an English philosopher, economist, as well as an administrator who was involved in the government, for example, in India for a certain time of his life. He was also the son of one of Jeremy Bentham's close friends, and Mill, like Jeremy Bentham himself, was a prodigy. For example, he started learning Greek at age 3. He was also influential in the founding of the University College London, now known as UCLA. He was a social reformer, like Bentham was, advocate for women's rights, birth control, public ownership of natural resources, and many other ideas that were far ahead of his time. And Mill tried to improve upon the legacy of utilitarianism that he inherited from Bentham. He put the utilitarian theory as follows: the creed, which accepts as the foundation of morals utility, or the greatest happiness principle, holds that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness, or unhappiness. So the idea is the right action, whether it's on the part of an individual or a group, is going to be whatever tends to produce the greatest overall amount of happiness. We've seen before that the utilitarian theory is going to be telling us to do something different from what the egoistic theory says. That is not anything new. The utilitarian and egoist might do similar things in certain circumstances, but there are going to be cases in which their moral theories tell them to diverge as well. I want to make a brief theistic digression, by the way. When we looked at Bob Adams' paper, Must God Create the Best, he remarks early on that the Judeo-Christian tradition to which he's primarily responding is not a utilitarian one. That is to say, he doesn't explain this very far, but he remarks that if God were a utilitarian, then God would be obliged to follow that principle P. That is, remember P said, if the GCB creates any world at all, the GCB would be obliged to create the very best possible world that she or he could create. That would be something that a utilitarian would mandate, but Adams thinks that that's not any part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and he does not himself think that a theist must hold that proposition P. So notice that Adams is not himself espousing the utilitarian theory. And that's a little bit curious because many of my students over the years who, when they first encounter the utilitarian doctrine, respond with something like, of course, that's so obvious, it's so banal, why do you even need to bother to explain this, to formulate it? Of course the right action is the one that produces the greatest overall amount of utility. But as we see today, and as we'll see in more detail in our next lecture, we're going to see objections to the utilitarian theory that help us see that it itself has limitations and in fact might even oblige us to do things that are morally objectionable, maybe actually morally abominable.